So the first thing that I'm doing within the script is just getting a reference to each one of the controls on the page. So I'm using jQuery to reference each one of the input elements, but I want to use document.querySelector in order to get to the raw DOM element of the video. Now the reason I'm not using jQuery is because I need the raw element because the video or the audio element is where the API of all of the media lies. So I'll go directly to video.duration or whatever the property is in order to work with the video element. Next, I'm declaring time step. The purpose of this is to give an increment to fast forwarding or rewinding. So as you press the fast forward or rewind button, it'll increment or decrement 5 seconds in the playback time. You'll see me use that in a moment. And we'll come back to format time in a moment as well. Now with the play pause button here, you can see that the text of the button switches between play and pause. So the first operation required in order to play and pause the video is to look at the video to see if it's paused or ended. Now for a lot more detail about the media API and some of the browser inconsistencies, please make sure to check out James Edwards' article on SitePoint, Essential Audio and Video Elements for HTML5. James goes into some of the nitty-gritty details about why you need to do what I'm doing here, because some different browsers handle the events a little bit differently in order to report back whether or not you can play or pause a video. In the end, you don't really need to know all that detail if you just want to implement the feature. So I'm going to keep it simple here and say that when you need to play or pause the video, you just need to first look to see whether or not it's paused or the video's ended, because this takes into account the different functionality among different browsers and how they fire their events. So if it's paused or ended, you can call video.play. Once the video is playing, then I update the text for the play pause button. Now, if it's not paused or ended, then you can pause the video. And again, I update the text at that point. Now, interestingly enough, there's no stop command within the API for the media. So in order to stop the video, what you first need to do is pause the video, set the current time to 0, and really that's all required as far as the API is concerned in order to stop the media from playing. Then I just have some housekeeping items here. When you click stop, I want to switch the play pause button to play, set the playback rate to the default value of 1, and then set the range for playback to the value of 1 as well. Now for the button that takes you to the beginning of the video. What you simply have to do there is take the video and set it to current time equals 0. Now if the video is playing and you do that, it just sets it back to the beginning and continues to play. If it's paused, it'll bring it back to the beginning and wait for you to give it its next command. Now for the end button, or this button over here, when the video is playing, if you press end, it takes it to the end of the video. And at that point, it also fires the end event. So all the playing is stopped, so it makes sense to update the play pause button to say play. Now for rewind and fast forward, or these buttons right here, all you need to do is take the current time. Here again, I had that variable set aside for 5 seconds, but you can use whatever step makes sense for your implementation. For volume, remember that's just a slider right here. So as the change event fires, I'm setting the video volume equal to whatever the value is of the slider itself. Now implementing the mute functionality takes a little bit of logic. So if I play the video here and change the volume and then mute it and then unmute it, notice how when I mute it goes to 0 and when I unmute it, it goes back to the previous volume level. So here within the script, I create a variable to hold the volume level that it was set at while the video is playing. Then as the user clicks on the mute button, it looks to see whether or not the video is muted. If it's not muted, it takes the current volume level and sets it aside in this vol variable. Then I can switch the muted state by simply setting muted to the opposite of whatever it is. So this will toggle whether or not the video is muted. So at this point, if it's been switched to not being muted, then it takes the volume value and sets the volume slider to the value that it used to be, and then switches the mute button back to the text of mute. So the video element itself remembers what volume level it was at before it was muted, and it goes back to that. Here all I'm doing is setting the slider back to the value that it used to be. And if the video is now muted, that range element gets set to a value of 0, and the button gets set to unmute. Now for the scrubber slider down here, as I press play, I can scrub along the video. And while that action is happening, it's updating the video's current time to whatever the value is of the range slider. So that allows me to take control of the video by sliding this slider. The playback rate does the same thing. The video's playback rate is affected by the value of the playback slider. Now all that's left to do is handle a few events. When the video begins to play, I have a span over here that reports the total time of the video. So that text is equal to whatever the video's duration is. Now I do have to format that time so it looks like it's minutes and seconds. And a very similar operation is done during the time update event. The remaining time span, or this one right here, is updated as this time update event fires, reporting the current time of the video. And again, that needs to be formatted into minutes and seconds. Also, to make sure that this scrubber stays in sync with the video, the scrubber's value is set to whatever the video's current time. Now let's go back up and take a look at that format time function again. So as the incoming seconds come into this function, I'm doing math.round in order to round the value off. Then I've created this variable in order to set aside the minutes. So if the seconds are greater than 60 or greater than a minute, then I need to split it up into minutes and seconds. Here with this division, I can find the number of minutes. And then with some simple math, I can find out what the remaining seconds are. Now, if the seconds are like 1 or 2, I need to have a little bit of padding to make it 0.1 or 0.2. So that's what this does. It just formats that value a little bit. And then once I have my minutes and my seconds, I glue it together with a colon and return that value up. So as you can see, there's a lot of control that you can take of the media elements. And there's a number of different events and a lot more to the API, but hopefully this gets you started in the right direction.